The 1950s wasn't just another decade. It was the beginning of something brand new. For the first time, young people weren't simply waiting to grow up. They were becoming something else entirely. They were teenagers. Before then, you went straight from childhood to adulthood, no in-between, no time to dream. But in the 50s, something changed. Young people began carving out their own identity, their own style, their own music, their own freedom. And much of that freedom, the independence teenagers and even adults enjoy today, we owe to the baby boomers. They were the first to say, "We want a life that belongs to us." Friday nights became their canvas. Diners glowed with neon, jukeboxes hummed to life, and the sound of Elvis Presley spilled out into the streets. Teenagers laughed, danced, and dreamed like never before. It was the dawn of youth culture, a spark that would change everything that came after. For most teenagers, the day began with the clang of an alarm clock and the smell of breakfast drifting through the house. A quick comb through the hair, a neat shirt or cardigan, books under one arm, then out the door before that yellow bus rumbled down the street. School was where the stories of friendship, mischief, and first crushes really began. Chalk dust floated through the air as teachers in suits or dresses wrote lessons across squeaky blackboards. Boys whispered behind cupped hands. Girls folded notes into perfect little triangles, hoping the teacher wouldn't see. Lunchtime was its own adventure, trays clattering, lunch ladies serving mashed potatoes and Jell-O cups, the sound of 100 voices bouncing off the walls. And somewhere, a kid tried to trade his apple for a cookie, a fair deal in any decade. After lunch came freedom, at least for a while. Boys shot hoops on cracked asphalt. Others tossed a baseball in the field, while girls jumped rope or talked about songs on the radio. And then came the cheerleaders, bright smiles and boundless energy, sweaters stitched with school letters, pleated skirts brushing their knees. Their chants filled the stands on Friday nights, leading the crowd beneath the glow of the stadium lights. When the last bell rang, the day didn't always end. Many teens headed straight to part-time jobs, scooping ice cream at the soda fountain, stocking shelves at the corner store, or pumping gas under a fading sunset. A few extra dollars meant you could buy a milkshake, drop coins into the jukebox, maybe even start saving for your first car. And later, after homework and dinner, the night grew quiet again, radios humming softly, dreams growing louder. It was the mix of routine and possibility that made the 1950s teenager different. They weren't children anymore, but not quite adults either. And in that in-between world, the foundations of teenage life and everything that followed were built. And when you're not quite a child, and not yet an adult, well, you find other ways to show the world who you are. In the 1950s, teenagers found their voice through the way they dressed. For the first time, young people weren't copying their parents' wardrobes. They were creating their own look, a new language written in fabric and style. For the clean-cut crowd, girls wore bright poodle skirts that swayed with every step, saddle shoes that clicked on linoleum floors, and soft cardigans buttoned neatly over blouses. Ponytails tied with ribbons bounced as they walked down school hallways. Boys wore crisp white shirts, slacks, and, of course, the prized Letterman jacket. That jacket wasn't just clothing. It was pride stitched in wool. And when a girl slipped on her boyfriend's leather sweater, oh, everyone knew what that meant. It wasn't just fashion. It was a promise. They called it going steady, but not everyone fit that tidy picture. There was another side, a louder one. Rock and roll had arrived, and with it came the rise of the rebels. Boys cuffed their jeans, slicked back their hair with Brill cream, and pulled on black leather jackets that caught the glow of every streetlight. Girls started wearing tighter sweaters, darker lipstick, and bolder attitudes. It was less about blending in, and more about standing out. For the first time, clothes became a declaration. You could tell who someone was, or who they wanted to be, just by the way they walked down the street. Whether it was a poodle skirt twirling under the gym lights or a leather jacket leaning against a jukebox, the message was the same. This is me. And once they found their identity, the next step came naturally, finding each other. Dances, dates, and first loves were waiting just around the corner. When once they found their style, it wasn't long before they found each other. For most teenagers, that meant one thing: Friday night, when the sun went down, the same gymnasium that echoed with textbooks and basketballs during the day transformed into something magical. Streamers hung from the rafters, balloons floated near the ceiling, and the music of Elvis or Buddy Holly poured through the speakers. They called them sock hops. Kids would kick off their shoes so they wouldn't scuff the gym floor, sliding across the polished wood in their socks. Girls twirled in poodle skirts, boys tried their best to keep up, and every nervous glance across the room felt like the start of something big. Dating in the 1950s was simple, but it meant everything. A milkshake shared at the soda fountain, 2 straws in one glass, a drive down Main Street with the radio turned up, the night air rushing in, or a Saturday at the drive-in, popcorn in your lap, stars overhead, and the glow of the movie screen lighting up young faces. And when a boy slipped his Letterman jacket over his girlfriend's shoulders, that wasn't just a kind gesture. It was a quiet promise, a way of saying, we're going steady. Every laugh, every dance, every late-night walk home felt like freedom. Parents might have thought it was all innocent fun, and it was, but to the teenagers living it, it felt like life itself. The dances, the drive-ins, the milkshakes, the long walks home, they weren't just pastimes. They were sparks of love, of rebellion, of youth discovering itself for the very first time. And once they had the taste of freedom, they wanted more. And in the 1950s, that freedom often came with 4 wheels and a full tank of gas. For teenagers in the 1950s, a car wasn't just a way to get from place to place. It was freedom on 4 wheels. It was status. It was independence. And it was the key to a whole new teenage world. The very first car was a rite of passage. Some teens worked long hours at part-time jobs just to save up for a used Chevy or Ford, polishing chrome in the driveway on a Saturday afternoon, showing it off to friends, or taking someone special for a ride. It meant you were finally in control. Friday nights were made for cruising. Chrome-covered Chevys rumbled down Main Street, radios blasting Elvis Presley and Chuck Berry. Neon lights from diners reflected off the cars as teens waved at each other from roll-down windows. The street itself became a stage, a place to be seen, to belong, and sometimes to stir up a little trouble. For some, cars meant competition. Out on the edge of town, far from adult eyes, headlights lined up side by side. Engines revved, tires smoked, and in an instant, the race was on. It wasn't just about speed. It was about pride, reputation, and the thrill of pushing limits. Whether it was a Sunday drive with the top down, a milkshake run with friends, or a drag race under the stars, cars gave 1950s teenagers something they had never had before, a taste of true freedom. And that freedom would shape not just their lives, but the culture of America itself. If cars gave teenagers freedom, music gave them a voice. And in the 1950s, that voice sounded like Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Buddy Holly. Rock and roll wasn't just new, it was electric. It rattled the walls, shook the dance floors, and worried a whole lot of parents. The jukebox became the heartbeat of teenage life. Drop in a nickel, and suddenly the room lit up with rhythm. Teens crowded diners to dance in the aisles, snapping fingers to doo-wop groups, or swinging to the pounding beat of rock and roll. Every glow of the jukebox felt like freedom in neon lights. Elvis swiveled his hips on TV, and parents nearly fainted. Preachers called it sinful. But teenagers? They screamed louder. They danced harder. And they made him a king. James Dean's rebellious stare from the movie screen only added fuel. Rock and roll had found its heroes. Not every teen slicked their hair back or wore a leather jacket. Some just stood on street corners harmonizing doo-wop under the glow of a streetlight. Others spent hours swapping 45s with friends, playing the same record until the grooves wore thin. But whether it was a jukebox in a diner, a record player in the bedroom, or a band in a high school gym, the music gave teenagers a voice. A loud, defiant, unforgettable voice. And with every riff and every beat, the soundtrack of rebellion was born. All that music, all that energy, and every spark of rebellion. It didn't end with the 1950s. It became the heartbeat of everything that followed. The baby boomers didn't just grow up. They built the world we know today. The cars they loved evolved into icons. The fashion they started returns every decade. And the music they danced to still fills our playlists, louder, faster, and forever young. They turned jukebox dreams into careers, drive-ins into memories, and teenage hope into a legacy that never stopped moving forward. From rock and roll to social change, from neon diners to digital screens, their spirit shaped it all. Because what began in the 1950s wasn't a moment in history. It was the spark of a new generation finding its voice and sharing it with the world. And even now, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. The laughter, the rhythm, the soul of youth that started it all.